Hey, my name is John. I'm the founder of Biggs Academy, and today I'll be going through some advice that you can actually use so you can be in the best position possible when you're doing the New South Wales Selective exam. I'm going to go over prior to the exam, during the exam, and even after the exam, and some key information and some takeaways that you need to take into consideration so you'll be in the best position possible in the exam in just a week and a half. Let's get into it. The New South Wales Selective exam is undergoing some radical changes this year with the introduction of Cambridge Assessment, now administering the new school exam and with its new structure. There's also some considerations that need to be taken into account, especially because of these new changes, that you need to be prepared of before you even go into the exam. I see many parents and both students alike make similar mistakes from my last 5 years of teaching, where if they only known the right advice and the right information, they might not have been in the position where they could have made the mistakes in the first place. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some key tips and advice that you may not already know about, and maybe just some good reminders for you to just be aware of, especially before the exam and during the exam, as well as after the exam, to make sure that you're in a very capable position so that you feel ready for the exam and you can perform your best when the time comes. As a parent, I believe it is your responsibility to make sure that your child's in the best position possible, because the parent's objective is to sort out all the admin related things so that the child and the student actually doing the exam only needs to focus on the exam. So you need to make sure that you have everything prepared so that the student doesn't even need to think about that at all. You want to take away all the added stress and all the added responsibility that they don't necessarily need to do, and you need to take that and make sure that it's all ticked off before they even enter that exam. Otherwise, you're kind of going into that exam half blind, and that's not going to yield the right results that you're actually looking for. The first thing that you need to prepare prior to the exam is making sure you have everything ready in terms of what you need to bring for it. First of all, you need to bring the test authority letter, including the application number. This will be quite important because if you don't actually bring it, you won't actually be able to complete the exam in the first place. So if you got it via email, print it out, have a hard copy so that your child can actually bring that to the exam hall. Secondly as well, you need to bring a snack. So you have a 20-minute exam in between this actual New South Wales Selective exam. So during that time, this is when you can actually eat. So treat this as a recess, definitely not like a lunch. So many students may actually think of it as they might eat too much, or parents actually pack too much. You have to eat a sandwich, a burger, or even packed rice, or even some sushi, something like that. I don't recommend that. You want to eat light. I recommend some fruits, just because this will be small enough and still be enough for it to be actually beneficial for you in performing well in the exam. I recommend a banana because that's high in potassium, and in terms of short-term memory and concentration, I think that will actually kind of help you give a little bit more of a pep on your step and kind of help you perform the later half of those exams as well. And last of all, you have to also bring a rubber, just because they'll be supplying pencils. You have to rub it out in case there is going to be any issues. Jumper, in case it gets cold, and if it might not be a warm day or even a cold day outside, but depending on where you'll be situated inside the actual exam hall. So if it was a hot day, then you might not even be wearing it. But if you're sitting underneath the air conditioning inside the hall, you might actually need it even on a hot day. So I think that kind of gives you a bit more flexibility as well. If it's a pretty okay in the exam in terms of a temperature level, then you just wrap it around your waist, wrap it around your neck, put it underneath the desk that you'll actually be situated in, and that's about it. You'll also have to bring on top of that as well a clear bottle of water, but it can't have any labels. So just buy a Mount Franklin bottle or whatever plastic bottle that you have, and you can just rip off the labels. It cannot be one of those thermos or a bottle which can't actually be seen through, just because of test purposes that some students can actually see through it or they can cheat through it. Carry all of this in a clear plastic bag. In certain halls, and probably in most halls, you won't actually be able to bring a bag in, just because of that added point again, where it could be used in terms of cheating and it can disqualify you. So in order for you to make sure that exam proctors are not examining your bag inside and out, you should carry everything you need in a clear plastic bag. I would say a large sandwich bag would actually suffice. Second reason is that you want to make sure that you're on time or even early. So ideally you're arriving at the exam hall 20 to 30 minutes prior to the actual exam starting. The reason why this is so important is because if you haven't been to the high school before, if you haven't visited there, or if you didn't go there in terms of your OC exam, or even if you did go there for your OC exam, you might not remember where certain things are. It's important for you to acclimatize and familiarize yourself beforehand. So where is the hall? Where do you need to line up when the exam starts? During the break time, where can you go in terms of the closest bathroom? Where's the bubblers? Where's the, some nearest bins? Where can you kind of hang out in terms of your break time? You don't want to be really far away during your break time or finding and spending a lot of time trying to find out these basic amenities when you can actually arrive a little bit earlier and be prepared in that regard. So be early, and that will save you a lot of heartache beforehand as well. On top of that as well, because it's COVID-19 protocol, some schools might not actually allow parents to actually go inside the school. And if parents are not allowed to go inside the school because there's too many people, then instead you might have to just let your child go in by themselves in terms of going into the hall. And if you're only a couple minutes beforehand and you can't actually direct them to the exam hall or where they need to line up, it can add that extra stress, which they don't really need. And last of all, prior to the exam, you want to make sure that you're wearing a school uniform. In terms of the child, they won't be able to wear anything else. It's not like mufti, even though you're going to another school, you have to wear your school uniform. And the reason why it's because the actual high school that you're actually doing the exam in, they can identify that you're actually here for a purpose, and you're not a stranger here to infiltrate or do something negative or anything like that. So that's quite important in terms of a safety perspective. And if you're not wearing a school uniform, you most likely won't be allowed to do the exam in the first place. Like I said, bring a jumper or a jacket in case the weather suits it. On the website as well, it does recommend you to bring a hat for the break time. I would disregard that just because I think that would be a waste of time, a waste of energy, just lugging that around throughout the day for your break and then just wearing it for 20 minutes. I think next, during the exam, the very first point that you need to take into consideration is that there will not be any time warnings at all. So in previous exams, they would actually say, okay, half time, 1 minute left, 5 minutes left, and then that would actually prompt students to actually be like, okay, so if it's half time and I'm not going through half the questions, then I need to move a little bit quicker. Or it helps you regulate the timing of your speed and acts as a gentle reminder. However, for the New South Wales Selective exam for this year onwards, they would not have that time warning, which is why it's important for students to make sure they regulate their time properly and make sure their time management is on point, because no one else will be reminding you. In a more safe setting, such as in a tutoring exam, or where you're practicing with just the teachers, or even just working at home, sometimes your parents might just warn you. However, for this exam, they won't. So it's important for you to just make sure that you're always looking at the clock and making sure that you're aligning to the speed that's needed. If you're running out of time and you still have several questions left to go, it's in your best interest to just guess, especially in the later portion of the actual exam, just because the questions at the end of the exam are typically more tricky when we're talking about reading, maths, and thinking skills. Not really for writing, but if you only have a minute left and you haven't done your conclusion, you just want to just make sure you write a conclusion so you fit that text type, and just letting the marker know that although it's not the best conclusion, you understand that a narrative or a persuasive or whatever they might be asking you needs a conclusion, and you know how to do it. The next point that I recommend is during the break and even before the exam, when you're lining up, there will be many other students that your child will know. So whether it be from their school or from a nearby school, there's going to be heaps of people they know. So in order for you to make sure that you're still focused, I think it's important for you to not talk to them as much as you usually do. It's not the case where you're being mean or being, thick-willed or anything like that. But I think it's quite beneficial for you and for them if you just focus on the task at hand. So you can be like, if they're stressing out about the exam, instead of you stressing out with them or thinking about how you do and how you compare up to them and how you guys will perform, just say, hey, I'll speak to you guys later, best of luck for the exam. And then you can kind of think to yourself what you need to prepare in terms of any last minute tips or any reminders for you to visually remind yourself before you head into that exam or into the next exam. This is quite important during the break as well. Typically during the break, other students will come and say, oh, that was really tough, or that was really easy, how did you find that? Instead of speaking to them, instead you just want to make sure you go to the bathroom, have a drink of water, have your break, and then plan what tests are happening next. And if you know if you have your writing exam next or your thinking exam next, then you can kind of think to yourself, what are the main points for you to remember in terms of an exam preparation perspective, or just making sure that, okay, you know that your week in fractions, what is the step-by-step process for multiplying mixed fractions. Just an example, but it's something that could be beneficial. During the exam as well, you want to be really mindful of where you're putting your answers in. So if you're writing it down on the question paper, that'll actually be quite good, because if you actually put it in the wrong order, you can actually see what you've written in the question paper and then just double check it in your answer paper. But in the unfortunate instance where you actually put in the wrong order, that's when you have to be keep calm, keep collected, and just make sure that you're double checking. So every couple of questions, just make sure that it's aligned. So if question 5 is D, then just make sure that you put for question 5, you put it in the right position. I think that would be quite beneficial for you. One of the recommendations I believe is it's actually much quicker if you actually make a mistake like that, for you to fix it yourself as opposed to asking the exam proctor and letting them know. So I know that that is currently the right process, or currently the process that they say that you have to follow if you put in the wrong order. However, it's much quicker if you do it and fix it yourself. So I recommend you doing that, just because that'll save you a lot more time in the actual exam. On top of that as well, when you go inside the exam hall, you want to make sure you're looking at a clock that's closest to where you are. So if you're at the back of the room, it's a bit of a waste of time if you're looking at the clock at the end of the room or on the front of the room. Instead, you want to look at the clock that's closest to where you are. They'll be basing the time and the exam of each time based on the clock that's actually in the exam hall. So don't treat it as if it's your own watch or anything like that. You want to base it on the clock that is actually in the exam hall. And that'll be post-exam, there's 2 considerations that need to be done. First thing that you need to do is just to make sure that you ask your child how they did in terms of each of those subjects. So for reading, thinking skills, maths, and writing, specifically ask them how did they go, what did they do poorly in, what did they do well in each of those exams, by the way, and then that will kind of give you a pretty good indication on how they went overall. If it turns out that they did pretty good, then I would recommend you to actually adjust your school choices that you've applied for accordingly, and if they didn't do pretty good, then you would want to adjust that accordingly as well. The second thing that you want to be taking into consideration is the fact that after the selective exam is going to be a bit of a break. Sure, you can still practice and make sure that you can actually potentially transfer into a higher selective school in year 7 onwards, but I think it's very important for children, especially after the exam, to have a bit of downtime. So if you normally study for about 3-4 hours a day, you don't have to study that much, just pull that back, and instead just study about 30 minutes on top of your usual schoolwork. It's going to be a lot more helpful for them mentally, and before you kick into gear again when you're preparing once you get into high school. I think that will be in their best interest as well. I don't recommend going cold turkey and not studying or tutoring completely. The reason why I don't think that would be a good play is because in March, after the exam, if you're not studying or doing content above your actual skill level, by the time you hit high school, in February or January next year, that's going to be about 7 or even more months where you haven't really done anything, and that's going to make you regress. And for students, especially heading into selective, you're already on the upper level of things, on top of your studies, but just make sure that you're not losing or regressing what you've learned as well. We want to keep up that momentum. So in conclusion, I've talked about some of the key elements and information that will be quite useful prior to the exam, during the exam, and after the exam. I think that as parents and teachers, it's our sole responsibility to make sure that students can actually focus purely on the exam, so we can focus on this admin related side. So if we prepare everything that they need for the exam, then I think that would actually take away a lot of stress and burden for the student and allow them to perform at their peak level. It won't guarantee it, but you'll have a higher likelihood of doing it if you don't have to worry about the clothes that you're wearing, what time you're waking up, if you're going to be late, what you need to bring. If that's all packed by your parents and your teacher, then that's it really. You just have to go and think about the exam. But if you have to take into consideration and think about all those different variables that can happen and occur, then you're not going to do as well. Imagine doing a writing exam, just thinking in the back of your mind, if you had to do this or do that, or bring this and do that, or what you had to do during break time. That's just going to be a huge waste of time. But I think that's a pretty good summary of the most important things to remember. If you had any other questions on this topic, or if you had any questions at all, definitely visit bingsacademy.com and I'd love to have a chat and a conversation with you. But otherwise, like this video, comment any questions and your thoughts down below, and that'll be greatly appreciated. I'll see you guys next time, and best of luck for the selective exam. Laters.